Are you ready to go from being chaotic to being calm and controlled when you bake? Well, stay tuned for the #1 tip for how to become a less scattered baker when you are in the kitchen. And bonus, you'll get to learn about how I will soon have a bionic hand. Hi everybody, I'm Shawnee and welcome to Begin with Butter. Today I have the best tip ever for helping you become much less chaotic and more confident and controlled as a baker. The tip is simply prepare all of your ingredients in advance, or as the French say, prepare your mise en place. In French, mise en place literally means everything in its place. That means for you as a baker that you will take each one of these ingredients and break them down with each one of these tools, and then you will be ready to bake. When I was a kid, every Saturday, my father would tackle his honey-do list. It started with a trip to the hardware store. This was back in the 80s. So I would pop my little 6-year-old self into the front seat of his car and we would go to the hardware store where he would get his materials. He would buy some extra nails and a piece of wood that I could hammer nails into while I watched him work. One of the things he would always do is measure twice and cut once. And what that means is he was always checking the accuracy of what he was doing before he did that final thing. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. Mise en place is the art of preparing everything that you need before you get started. Mise en place does not mean that I simply have all of my ingredients out and that I am measuring as I'm baking. That is what leads to that chaos and that anxiety and that stress that so many people translate into baking is too hard for me. Baking is not too hard for you if you just prepare in advance. What you see in front of me is not mise en place. It's simply some ingredients and some tools sitting out in front of me. Mise en place is the marriage of the ingredients and the tools to prepare you for a good bake. Some of you are brand new to baking and some of you are veterans. If you're watching this video, it's fair to assume that you may need a little bit of convincing about why to prep your ingredients beforehand. When I was new to baking and I was trying to gather up my own confidence in the kitchen, the thing that killed my confidence the most during those first couple of years was being in the middle of using my mixer and not having an ingredient next to me. So that meant that things were constantly getting overmixed. God bless those of you who were eating that stuff in the first couple of years. But it also meant that I felt frazzled and often out of control when I was baking. There were many times that I felt like I'm just not cut out for this, or this is too hard, or I can't do it. And guess what? None of that was true. That feeling of anxiety, chaos, it all went out the window the minute I started preparing my ingredients in advance. Here's the truth. Come closer. Closer. Okay, that's good. Baking is actually really simple, but it's a game of inches. That means it matters when you add your flour. It matters when you add your eggs. Timing matters almost as much as the ingredients themselves. For example, with the chocolate chip cookies I'm getting ready to make, it would be a disaster to overmix my batter because I have to turn away from my machine while it's going to go and measure out some chocolate chips. Unless I'm looking for tough and crumbly cookies, the best thing to do will be for me to have my chocolate chips at the ready to pour into the machine at the right time. Simple. Game of inches. As I said before, this is not my prepared mise en place. I still have my flour, my sugar, and everything else in its original containers. And if I start from here, I guarantee that what I produce is not going to be what I could produce if I simply prepare all of my ingredients. So this is not prepared mise en place, but The first step of preparing your misapplause starts with reading your recipe. This seems like such a simple step that you wouldn't even think about it, but it is actually the most important thing that you can do in planning what your mise en place needs to look like. A couple of examples. In raisin bread recipes all over the world, and in any recipe using dried fruit, you will often see that the recipe calls for you to rehydrate that fruit or plump up that fruit using some kind of liquid, either water or even sometimes using alcohol. If you just take that dried fruit and put it in a prep bowl and set it to the side, by the time it's time to incorporate that plumped fruit into your recipe, everything will have to come to a grinding halt. Another great example is if you have to sour milk. What I mean by souring milk is taking milk and adding either lemon juice or vinegar and allowing it to sour to become more like a buttermilk. This is a step that you need to take during your preparation period, not when you get to the soured milk portion of the recipe, because then, once again, everything comes to a grinding halt. And sometimes you just don't have the flexibility of time to stop your whole recipe to plump fruit or sour milk. Let's start prepping our mise en place. You are fully versed now in why we should prepare our mise en place before we start baking. Here's the how. First of all, I have to start with a clear countertop. A clear countertop for me means that I'm starting with a clear mind. I then take out all of my ingredients, double checking the recipe as needed. Next, as a final check to make sure that I have everything, I actually line up all of my ingredients on my countertop in the order that I'm going to use them in the recipe. Finally, I take out whatever tools I'm going to need. These would be my bowls, my measuring cups and spoons, and of course, my beloved digital food scale. And with that, I'm ready to prep my ingredients. Right off the bat, we see why preparing our mise en place is so important. This recipe, like many baking recipes, requires that we combine all of our dry ingredients and set them aside. This is not a step that you want to take after your mixer is going. This recipe also requires butter, cream cheese, and 2 kinds of sugar to be mixed at the same time. This is another great reason to prep in advance. Remember how I had all that stuff on my counter? All of that's gone now, and I am left with a properly prepared mise en place, which means that all of my ingredients are weighed and measured out and ready to go right in here at the appropriate time. This is particularly appropriate with cookies because with cookies, the less you mix them, the better they will be. So if I was running around the kitchen trying to weigh out my flour and all of my other dry ingredients while my butter and sugar were working in my mixer, then that would be a recipe for very, very tough cookies. I actually love doing this part of baking. First of all, because as I'm pulling out ingredients, it helps me to know whether or not I even have everything that I need to get started. How frustrating is it to get into the 3rd or 4th step of a recipe when you've already used some ingredients and realize that you don't have something that is important to that recipe? For those of you who are beginners, preparing all of your ingredients beforehand will help you build confidence that you didn't know that you had as a baker. Having everything laid out before you will help you stay calm, cool, and collected as you make your way through new and old recipes. That level of confidence that you'll develop from staying calm during the baking process will help you grow exponentially on your baking journey. Also, from my own experience, it helps cut down on mess. First of all, you saw everything cluttered on my countertop before I got started. Had I started baking, had I started mixing a dough or a batter with all of that stuff unmeasured on my countertop, it would have been a disaster. Starting with all of that stuff on your counter unmeasured and unweighed is a perfect storm for helping you feel frazzled and anxious while you're baking. And I can tell you from experience that those times that I felt frazzled and anxious during baking have been the times that my flour, my cocoa powder, and my confectioner's sugar have conspired against me, jumped off the counter, and gone poof. taking 10 minutes to prepare your Misapplause can spare you from an entire afternoon of despair, and it will also spare you the sadness of a poorly baked product. One of the missions of Begin with Butter is to help you become more confident as a baker. And this practice, prepping all of your ingredients before you even get started, is one of the top 3 ways that you can develop that confidence. So you've been looking at this thing the whole video. And for those of you who are curious about how this happened, this is the point where I'll explain it to you. If you're not curious or if you've seen enough, I hope that you find these tips to be super helpful and that you have great success using Misapplause as you prepare your next baked goods. This is actually a Pilates injury. I will never disparage Pilates or yoga. I think they are incredible disciplines. This was a freak accident. This is something unfortunate that happened, and for the next few weeks, that means that this will be here with me. I do kind of want to give it a name since my arm is soon to be bionic. So if you have any ideas, feel free to leave them in the comments below. That's the story, Morning Glory. Again, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it useful, and I cannot wait to see you in the next installment. If you've made it this far in the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. The ultimate goal in all of this is to reach a lot of people and to help a lot of people become better bakers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.